Developed over 4,000 years ago, Egyptian hieroglyphic writing is at once a fine art and a symbolic code. It was once an exalted part of Egyptian culture and continues in a timeless fashion. The shapes of these pictographs have elegant forms in their lines, and subtle distinctions between them are drawn in exacting detail, while alluding to underlying patterns of symbolism. In this presentation, historical linguist David Leonardi discusses evidence to support his alternative perspective on hieroglyphic decipherment. While Egyptologists have made some progress in deciphering the late Egyptian language, Leonardi finds evidence that ancient and Middle Egyptian are closely related to ancient Hebrew. Leonardi will also show that a proper understanding of compound symbols is necessary to decipher all phases of the Egyptian language. Additionally, evidence will be presented showing Latin influence during the late Egyptian period, which has led to some phonetic value changes. Furthermore, we will look at sample texts with some proposed transliterations and translations. We will also entertain discussions of particular symbols as we move towards our goal of uncovering the secrets of the Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Hi, my name is David Leonardi. I began my academic work in 1991 studying ancient Hebrew and then soon after studying Egyptian hieroglyphic writing. Within a few years I began to study historical linguistics. Now, Egyptologists have made some progress in deciphering late Egyptian. I've been finding evidence of correspondences between Middle Egyptian and ancient Hebrew. By November or December of 1992, I became convinced that ancient Egyptian and Middle Egyptian were much more closely related to ancient Hebrew than what scholars have thought. I'm going to highlight three reasons why these correspondences have been overlooked by most scholars. But first, I should point out an important distinction within hieroglyphic writing. There's two types of symbols. There are regular symbols, which correspond to single phonetic values, and then there are compound symbols. A compound symbol is composed of two or more hieroglyphic symbols put together to form one symbol, and the individual parts correspond to the phonetic values that constitutes a word. So one compound symbol will correspond to a word, sometimes with prefixes and suffixes. So a good example of a compound symbol is this symbol. It's a forearm of a lion and the head of a lion. It's a curious symbol. What could this mean? Well, it's to be read actually arm, lion, head, which is Yod, Ari, Ras, which is by the acrophonic principle Y-A-R, that's Yar. Yar is the name of the Nile that the Egyptians used. We find it in the book of Exodus, and the Israelites would have used the same name for the Nile that the ancient Egyptians used. Interestingly, at the bottom of the Rosetta Stone in Greek writing, in the Greek spelling, there's the name of the language at the top of the Rosetta Stone, which is written in hieroglyphic writing, and it's called Hierois, and that compares to Yar. So ois we know is a Greek suffix, and yer, iota, epsilon, rho, compares to Yar with only a small vowel change. So we could actually translate Hierois as Nilotic, but of course that doesn't have anything to do with the modern language, which is called Nilotic. The first reason that I would point out why correspondences have been difficult to find is that some meanings of some Hebrew words have changed. So that makes it difficult to know what the corresponding names would be for symbols in Egyptian. So this is the most common Egyptian arm symbol, and we know it corresponds to the sound E in the late Egyptian language period, so then it could correspond to either the letter I or the letter Y. And yod in Hebrew means hand, but it originally meant arm. So if we know that originally meant arm, then we can see the correspondence between the pronunciation of this symbol and the letter Y, or the letter yod. Now kaf or kappa is translated palm, but that originally meant hand. So this is yod. A second reason why correspondences are difficult to see is that many of the Egyptian symbols are abstract. So a couple of examples. This is an example of an abstract symbol. Even though we know to classify this with the building symbols, it's still abstract. And just very quickly, this is another abstract symbol. This symbol is composed of 3 parts. This symbol has been traditionally listed as unclassified because scholars were not sure of what it represents. It's the first letter in the Khufu cartouche, and it does correspond to the Hebrew letter Chet. This is actually the dark moon or the new moon, and interestingly, in ancient Hebrew, the word for dark and the word for new moon and new begin with the same letter, Chet. Another reason why correspondences have been difficult to see is I believe that there is substantial evidence, which we're going to look at in this next segment, showing that there was Latin influence in the changing of some phonetic values of symbols during the Greco-Roman period. So we'll look at that in this next segment. Here we see one of the Alexander cartouches, and we can see the acrophonic principle illustrated. Accipiter Leo Calathus Z E Nauticus Trado Rictus Z. This is some of the evidence that I'm citing that Latin has had an influence replacing some of the phonetic values of symbols during the Greco-Roman period. The first symbol in the Alexander cartouche on the right side is a symbol of an eagle. Now, Egyptologists have called this the Egyptian vulture symbol, but that is not to be confused with the vulture symbol. And in ancient Hebrew, the spelling of the large bird, which is spelled Ras Aleph He, that word means look. It's based on the word Ra, which means see. And eagles are known for their sight. This bird is believed to be extinct. It's an eagle with a long beak, but it's unmistakably an eagle. On this Egyptian stela, we see the spelling in Greek of Cleopatra and Philopaterto. Now that suffix is spelled tau omicron, and we will see that in the next visual where we see the same spelling in hieroglyphs. On this example of a Cleopatra cartouche, we see Cleopatrato, and the suffix is spelled tel egg. And I believe that the egg symbol in this case corresponds to O from the word ovum, from Latin, whereas in ancient Egyptian I believe that it corresponds to the letter B. So we have, by the acrophonic principle, Kalis, Leo, Accipiter, Obeth, which is the word for rope in ancient Hebrew and presumably in Egyptian, Plaga, Trado, Rictus, Accipiter, Tel, Ovum. On this view we see hieroglyphic writing on the Temple of Dendur, which is in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We see cartouches at the top for Caesar as father, Caesars K. Patra, and Autocrator. In the next view, we'll see an enlargement of of these an enlargement of similar cartouches. Here we see another example of a cartouche for Autocrator on the right and the Caesar cartouche on the left. On the bottom left, we see a couple of ancient spellings, which would be ethos keteb, or ethos right. But it is not certain as to the translation of those words during the late Egyptian language period. Here we see another illustration of the acrophonic principle in two different cartouches of Ptolemy: Plaga, Tel, Obeth, Leo, M, E, E, Sempiternus. One interesting thing in the hieroglyphic writing I've found is the positions of arms in symbols corresponds to meanings. I've been able to discover when the arms are vertical, it appears at the end of the word salam, so it corresponds to the letter M. I have also seen, as on the far right in this illustration, arms in the shape of a W graph. And then I noticed arms hanging down and arms open and arms straight out and then arms up and at an angle. And I began to realize that these positions of the arms correspond to question words. So we see, since the first symbol corresponded to M, I knew it had to correspond to the meaning of either what or who. Then it seemed to me, the third symbol, it seemed reasonable that since the arms were horizontal, outstretched, that would correspond to the meaning where. Then the symbol to the right of that probably corresponds to the meaning why, and logically the symbol following that appears to correspond to the meaning how. I know that the he prefix in ancient Hebrew corresponds to the meaning is when prefixed to the first word of a question. So then we're able to assemble the meanings of all of these arm symbols: who, what, where, why, how, and is. There are other arm symbol positions. There's the position of arms which corresponds to worship, and that would correspond to the letter S, and there are other arm positions. But clearly, these are some of the meanings that these symbols correspond to. Here is an example of King Tut's famous cartouche, and it reads Laolem Thoth Kelamed. The phonetic value of the quail-chick symbol, Egyptologists and myself have agreed, based on some evidence, that it corresponds to the letter Vav. I'm not 100% certain of that, but hopefully we'll find verification of that. And the second symbol here corresponds to Ayin Lamed, where the second symbol within that compound symbol is a block corresponding to Laban. In my book, Egyptian Hieroglyphic Decipherment Revealed, in Chapter 2, I discuss 11 methods of Egyptian hieroglyphic decipherment. Most are general methods and some are particular to Egyptian. The most important method that I discuss in Chapter 2 I call paradigm matching or paradigm matching. I use the term paradigm because I use it to refer to more particular sets of related spellings or word formations, whereas I generally think of paradigm as the larger picture or having more universality to it. But linguists will use the pronunciation paradigm only for inflectional morphology. Now, morphology is the study of word formation. Inflectional morphology has to do with grammatical variations of a root word. So, for example, walk, and the set would be walk, walked, walks, walking, words like that. You can see the root meaning is the same in all of the word formations. The derivational morphology, on the other hand, it deals with the generation of new words with usually unrelated meanings. So, for example, in English, we have the form clude, which comes from the Greek in such words as include, preclude, occlude, seclude, exclude. That's a set of related formations because each word formation contains the form clude, and so that's a paradigm or paradigm. I'll briefly show this is an example of an ancient Hebrew paradigm or paradigm, because lamed or L is a common element having the meaning of negate or negation. This la is not, and so forth. But this is discussed in my book, Discovering Ancient Biblical Hebrew Word Formation. Now, an example from Egyptian can be seen here. I've assembled 5 different spellings, or I isolated 5 different words and then assembled 5 spellings where each spelling contains the owl symbol. Now, I know most of the phonetic values of the other symbols, so it appears to me like this, where the blanks are where the owl symbol appears, because at first I did not know the phonetic value of the owl symbol. Then I searched for ancient Hebrew spellings where the spellings correspond phonetically, and the same Hebrew letter would appear in all of these blanks. So I found these words, and that allows me to match this paradigm or paradigm with this paradigm or paradigm. So that suggests that the owl symbol in the ancient Egyptian period and the Middle Egyptian period probably corresponded to the letter Aleph. Now, I know Egyptologists ascribe the letter M to the owl symbol. I don't know what the evidence is for that, but I know that may be correct for the late Egyptian language period, but I don't know. But this at least shows how the method works, and that's paradigm matching or paradigm matching. This is a common cartouche, and on the right side it begins son, foxhead, staff, and then a common word for priest. We see Sar, Kawanai, Salam. This is a view from the tomb of Horemheb. On the far left side, I'm not sure of the phonetic value of the first symbol, but it appears to be the word tool, so that may be the letter K. So we have tool, to him, maintain, chariot, and then on the far right side we see Salam min Allah Barak, or Berek in ancient Egyptian, peaceful, from God bless. This is another view from the tomb of Horemheb. On the right side, we see maintain chariot clothing or maintain chariot dress. That the word labas is the most general word for clothing. On the far right side, we see keteb, labab, and then the word for life, which is spelled cup, arm. The arm here is holding a cup, which is difficult to see. So that's right, heart, affirm, life. Here is a view of hieroglyphic writing from King Tut's tomb. The first word is love, LB, axe, guitar. Love, pronounce, praise. There's a word there that I have not yet determined the phonetic values of the compound symbol. That appears to be 2 phonetic values, and it has the yod vav suffix. And then we see decree, peace, go, rejoice, forever, thoth, as guide, party. This is also a view from King Tut's tomb, and highlighted in red we see ethos, dead, ethos, and then I'm not sure of the last word. On the right side we see some common words, salam, lek, which is go, party, and rejoice. Here is an example of 3 different spellings of the word for write, keteb. We have throne, tel, egg, throne, tel, house, throne, tel, village. This is an example of a paradigm or paradigm because the phonetic values match, even though the spellings end in a different symbol. This symbol is D60 on Gardner's list. This is one of the most remarkable compound symbols. It's to be read as poor, sack, leg, and the remarkable thing about this symbol is that each of the parts, or the meanings of the parts, is spelled exactly the same way in ancient Hebrew. This could not be a coincidence. So we have sack, 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 which means poor, sack, leg. By the acrophonic principle, that's SSS. When there's 3 consecutive identical symbols, the middle symbol is either yod or vav, so this is SYS, which means rejoice. So these 4 words must have been in common between ancient Egyptian and ancient Hebrew. This is a view from Queen Nefertiti's tomb. On the far left we see maintain chariot my heart. On the far right we see peace or peaceful. Right in the middle we see no, party, dead, pronounce complement. At the very bottom we see throne, tel, house, which means right. This is a view from the tomb of Unas. The cartouche of Unas is actually rabbit, water, reed flower, folded cloth, or as I interpret it, continue or continual. And that is actually the word for mercy, which is actually also the name of a rabbit or rabbit. So this individual was named Rabbit or Bunny. We have Cheth Mem Lamed Nun, that's the spelling of that name. I highlighted in the middle on the top the word no or disregard, and then towards the left we see to dream, perfect, and towards the bottom we see ethos, dream. And there is some of the English translation. Here is an example of the word peace, salam.
and we can see the acrophonic principle is in view here. Sames, Laja, Vav, and Mem. The basket symbol is a symbol of a container, and some of the container symbols correspond to the letter M. Here we see the word decree, and it's found in late Egyptian and ancient and Middle Egyptian as well. And we see the acrophonic principle illustrated. Dasa, tel, dabes, tel. This word is based on the root word dalet tav, which is a very common word for law. Here we see the cartouche that's understood to be the Ramses cartouche. The first word is laolem, which means forever, and then we see ankh, female, falcon head, sun, and then snake tail, the 3 fox pelts, and the double noon suffix. The double noon suffix is very uncommon or very rare, but it does occur, and I'll have to translate this. It could possibly be read as rejoicing on, depending on the meaning of the noon suffixes. Here we see a sample of the shorthand hieroglyphic writing, which was very common on papyrus texts. At the very top we see Rakeb. In the same column underneath that we see love my name. On the top right side we see Ankh, water, dark moon, and that's Kame, which is a word for black in Coptic Egyptian, and it appears this was probably also found in late Egyptian. And then towards the bottom right side we see my name right.
This is how the Egyptians drew a symbol of the sun. You can see that the polar diameter is shorter than the equatorial diameter. It wasn't until the early 1970s that we had powerful enough telescopes to be able to discern that the polar diameter of the sun is slightly shorter than the equatorial diameter. It's very difficult to measure the difference. One estimate is that the polar diameter is 70 kilometers shorter. The Egyptians drew an exaggerated form of that, and they always drew the sun this way. I believe that the Egyptians knew that the polar diameter of the sun was shorter than the equatorial diameter. So this is one clue, I believe, of ancient Egyptian technology. But how did they know this? Was it by their understanding of celestial mechanics, or did they have exceedingly powerful telescopes? Also, another example where we see Egyptian technology in hieroglyphic writing is on a wall carving in Dendera. Many people know of the apparent light bulbs. They look strikingly similar to a Crookes tube, which the scientist Röntgen used to discover X-rays. So there again is another example. And there are not many examples, or none that I know of, in addition, that shows ancient Egyptian technology, but those are 2 examples. This symbol is a cup with walking legs, and the cup we know correspond, or I find corresponds to the letter Chet, and so it most likely corresponds to the word which is spelled Chet Mem Tzad, which means culture, as in the phrase culture of wine, but it's also the liquid that they use to dip bread in. As in the biblical book of Ruth, on the cereal farm, Boaz and Ruth are dipping their bread in what must have been beer. It was a culture, and a culture on a cereal farm would be beer. So this is about one of the vessels. The vessels corresponded to phonetic values determined from what those vessels would hold, whether it was wine or milk or beer or water and so forth. So this word is ill, or it means ill, but it's spelled chet lamed. Now this, the reason why I point this symbol out is because it reminds us, well, there's you know how wine a full body wine is said to have legs, and this could possibly connote some sort of joke or saying that the ancient Egyptians had as well. So this is an example that suggests that we may be able to find evidence of some Egyptian sayings or proverbs by the ways in which they combined their symbols. I'm going to mention the net symbol again, which I've mentioned before. And sometimes it appears this way, sometimes it appears this way, and sometimes in carvings it simply appears that way. And this is called the stool symbol, but it's a symbol of a net. It's plaga during the Greco-Roman period, and spelled, well, the word for net is spelled chet beth lamed, and I believe that it's used to symbolize one of the prime elements. Now, what is a prime element? I mean a prime element of meaning, an element of the word formation. So let me give an example from English. The element re, as in such words as renounce, rename, reclaim, remove, and so forth. Re in the re prefix in those cases means repeat. Now, Hebrew didn't write the vowels, and Egyptian did not write the vowels. So that would be the letter R if we were to write it the way that Hebrew or Egyptian was written. But in ancient Hebrew, it's the letter Z that means repeat. I believe, well, Hebrew scholars are in agreement that one of the meanings of chet, as found in the word chet yod, which means life, one of the meanings is life, or possibly nature. But one of the other meanings, I believe, is medium. And I believe that this symbol was chosen, a symbol of a net, was chosen to symbolize medium because medium is that which flows through a net. So, for example, a medium like water or air or space, a medium, it flows through a net. So I believe that's why they chose this symbol. And actually, the form of this symbol connotes half, or seems to connote half, and the word for half also begins with the letter chet. So those are three examples. So in that last example, a symbol can correspond to a prime element of meaning, which is used in the word formation of the language. And I just want to briefly mention, I recently revised my thinking on the phonetic value of the guitar symbol. For a long time I speculated that it was probably the letter K, so I looked at the word axe guitar and thought it meant go, lamed kaf, LK, go. But that word appears based on different contexts that I've read, where sometimes the word love does lead as the first word of an ancient Egyptian text. So when sometimes the axe guitar is the first word, I believe that this most likely is the word love, lamed beth, so this would correspond to the letter B. I know that the heart symbol corresponds to the letter B, and these two symbols are similarly formed, and some symbols which compare with similar forms have the same phonetic values. It's not always the case, but sometimes it's the case. So here we've seen that a symbol can pictorially represent one thing, but that there may be an underlying reason or underlying reference to an additional meaning or even to a prime element of meaning. We have also seen that a hieroglyph can give clues about the Egyptian culture, and hieroglyphs in a few instances may give us clues about ancient technological knowledge that the Egyptians had. And some of the hieroglyphs must have corresponded to the elements of meaning that was used in word formation in developing the language, in the structure of the language. We are not at the end of decipherment. We are only at the beginning of decipherment. There are a great many things to discover about this great culture of Africa, and by continuing to work in this field, perhaps we may be able to gain something of their lost wisdom. I hope that you all will continue to join me in that search. Thank you.
Egyptian writing adorns palaces, temples, and tombs. The signs represent everyday people, animals, and objects. The Egyptians could see words in the juxtapositions of everyday things, people, and their expressions, thereby heightening a sense of meaning in life. This in turn is also mirrored in their crafts and portrait scenes of everyday life. This life as art must have taken on an almost magical quality, but the words themselves held roots and meaningful elements, and some symbols depict these elements. There are a great number of symbols and symbol configurations. There are over 300 regular symbols and thousands of compound symbols. We have learned how to decipher and understand compound symbols by elucidating the phonetic values of their parts, which consist of regular symbols. Some of the compound symbols we have looked at are the woman holding an ankh, the 3 papyrus flowers, the Isis crown, the spiral with Upper and Lower Egypt, and the cup with walking legs. We have seen the importance of pattern matching when comparing Egyptian to other classical languages of the Near East, and we have briefly considered a theory of word derivation for Egyptian and ancient Hebrew. We have discussed methods thus far only found in this documentary that take us along paths of discovery in this field. Not only can the lost wisdom of the Egyptians be found in their ancient technology, but also in the Egyptian language itself. In future presentations and books, we shall further unravel these mysteries. The results and findings of decipherers are sure to entertain our curiosities and fulfill our expectations in acquainting us with an ancient Egyptian enlightenment as we continue to search for their lost wisdom.